The fourth and related point is that, particularly in the United States, and I was having this conversation last night, you know, we in the United States, and by the way, I'm an American who practices in Canada, so I'm one of you guys. We in the United States have had, you know, at least 100 years of tremendous success using a narrow methodology, the separated circles, and we've gotten to the moon. We won World War II, but now that same methodology is shackling us to systems that are obviously degrading our health and economic vigor, but we are unable and perhaps unwilling to move away yet from the very ways of thinking that have brought us to this position. And I think it's a problem much more profound in the United States than it certainly is in Canada and other countries. And the problem is that we've been successful with this methodology. It makes it that much more difficult to shift away from it. And that shift is a shift in a manner of thinking. We have, I wonder if this has a pointer, yeah. We have the atom bomb and the getting to the moon was a convergent problem where if you could use that narrow, in both of those cases, scientific and engineering focus towards a well-defined problem, separating it up sufficiently into its increments, you would solve it, and we did. Unfortunately, we find ourselves in a different category of problem, which is the divergent problem. A divergent problem is the kind of problem that doesn't lend itself to narrow focus, that there's actually a multiple, there's many different potential solutions to it. So that's the theory grounding, and here are a few rules then that we would provide to get us over the constraints and maximize the opportunities that emerge from that theoretical understanding of what our problem is and what we need to do about it. So we have a number of rules for integrated procedures, and they're presented in some greater length in this book, which you can look at later on. It'll be floating around. The first one is design with everyone. Now, first of all, something else about me. I've long had the opinion that if you can't explain something to me like I'm a 4-year-old, then there's something wrong with your explanation. And I've also found that true in working with people, that if you can't really put it in a very simple form that everybody can understand, you're not living up to your responsibility as a communicator. And at the core of this idea of collaborative work, really there is the obligation to make things conceptually as clear as you can. Now, for a faculty member, that's almost impossible because we come from the Irwin Corey school of, you know, not everyone's old enough to remember Irwin Corey, I'm afraid. But anyway, Irwin Corey school of making things infinitely complicated as a prerequisite for tenure. This is quite different. I think when we're working collaboratively in a democracy with multi-stakeholders, it requires clarity. So this first one is design with everyone, the principle, the rule. And the idea is that everyone can design or everyone can solve problems. Everyone can think in an integrated way. And when everyone designs, design improves. All of these are highly controversial statements in many fields. The second thing about integrated solution making is start with a blank sheet, beginning with as few preconceptions and fixed outcomes as possible. Integrated thinking cannot occur if certain issues are excluded. Why does this matter? A lot of times you bring people together in a room, say, well, we want your opinion. 99% of the decisions are all already been made, feeling that it would be unsafe to allow democracy to, you know, rear its ugly head. Unfortunately, for better or worse, the new world we may be entering is going to require a much more courageous stance relative to opening up our processes to true collaboration. Absent that, you won't get the divergent solutions that I was talking about previously. It does require open-endedness. It does require that you don't know exactly where you're going to end up. Consequently, the sheet needs to be blank at the beginning of the exercise. That doesn't mean, as some people might think, that a open-ended process operates without a grounding in either the physical constraints of the landscape or absent an acknowledgement of whatever the policy base is. So our third rule is that you start from whatever policy base is extant. You wouldn't be ignoring the Clean Water Act, for example, or the Clean Air Act, or whatever sets of regulations that were already pertaining to the site. It doesn't mean that you may not challenge some of them. Particularly, we find at the detail level of engineering standards, for example, or zoning and subdivision standards are often worthy of challenging. But in our experience, most of the time, the policy basis, particularly at the higher level, the examples I've just given of the Clean Water and Clean Air Act, for example, are robust and need to be acknowledged, and they can be your friend.